So obey Allah and obey the ruler, the messenger and the ruler. Those ulil amri minkum. That's how I got to that. هذا الأمر. وكذلك متى جعل العقل سائسا وجب على سائر القوة أن تطيعه. So when the reason becomes the governor, then it's an obligation on the rest of the faculties to obey it, to obey reason. Your quwwa ghadabiyya, your quwwa shahwiyya, all these different faculties should obey reason. وكما أن الله تعالى جعل الناس متفاوتين كما نبه الله تعالى عليه بقوله ورفعنا بعضكم فوق بعض درجات ليتخذ بعضهم بعضا سخريا. So Allah says, we have made you mutafawitun. So in other words, tafawut is these differences in degrees and otherwise. So hierarchy is a type of tafawut. Some people yatafawat yafutuhu fi shay. He surpasses. This person surpasses that person in his studies. He studies more. He gets up earlier. So there's always tafawut, and part of the modern world is this idea of leveling. This is something that was identified early on by people like Kierkegaard, that they wanted to level everything, to make everything mediocre. So buildings are no longer, if you look at modern buildings, there's nothing that really distinguishes them from other buildings. In the past, they were concerned about the aesthetic qualities. Now it's functional. Everything's functional. So he says that this tafawut amongst people, this differing in degrees, is indicated by Allah's word, like that we raised some of you over others. You could interpret that we privileged some of you over others. Right? Darajats, by degrees. لِيَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُهُمْ بَعْضًا سُخْرِيًّا. So what's really interesting about sukhriya, right, with a dhamma, sikhriya, with a kasra, is to exploit. If it had sikhriya, it would be, but sukhriya is to use, to gain benefit from another, right? But sukhriya can easily become sikhriya. And this is where you get the problem in hierarchical cultures, and this is why, like the communists, because of all the abuse, they easily convince those people that are being exploited that, oh, these are evildoers, we need to get rid of them and overthrow them. And this all comes from bad siyasa, from bad governance, that people aren't, when you're in a position, when you're in a privileged position, what are you going to do with your privilege? Are you going to use it as a source of abuse, or are you going to use it for the betterment of what's around you, which includes bettering your society, not just bettering yourself or bettering your family, but bettering the society, doing things that are useful. So this is really important because it's so antithetical now to the modern worldview, where they disdain outwardly. I mean, you have all these Marxists right here living in $2 million homes and things like that, and then they vote for like Marxists. But then when the criminals start encroaching, right? That's a nice word, encroachment. When they start encroaching on them, suddenly, like over in San Francisco, when the billionaire gets stabbed, oh, better do something about crime, right? That's when the concern comes, when the billionaire gets stabbed, because suddenly it's affecting them. I mean, if you watch some of these people that are really disturbed about what's happening in academia right now, because you have all these teachers that are shocked by these students that are literally protesting in their classrooms. And they're so obtuse because they're not even aware that they created those students. And that's what Dostoevsky, that's why The Demons or The Possessed is such an important book to read, because that's what he shows. He's got this idiot who Stepan, he's just a complete idiot who has trained these kids that now have become nihilists, and when they turn on the society, he can't understand it. He created them. You created all these nihilistic, relativistic kids that don't recognize any type of authority. You destroyed authority by saying there's no such thing as authority. And then they become more susceptible to ideology than anybody else. Because the worst type of authority is the tyranny of an ideology. That is the worst type of authority, is the tyranny of an ideology. And that's what happens. They take on these ideologies that are then, like, as Dostoevsky pointed out, they're really demons that have possessed them. The ideas are the demons. So you have all these people now out there doing all these crazy things in the name of their ideological tyranny, the tyranny over their mind, because they can't even think. They've never been taught to think or to really question. They think they're questioning, but they're not. So this is a really important point that he's making. And so then he says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلَ قُوَّ النَّفْسِ مُتَفَاوِتًا. And in the same way, in your own selves, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. In your own selves, there are different faculties that have degrees in your own self. وَجَعَلَ مِنْ حَقِّ كُلِّ وَاحِدَةٍ أَن تَكُونَ دَاخِلَةً فِي سُلْطَانِ مَا فَوْقَهَا. And so God has made it so that there's min haqqi kulli wahidatin, that it's the duty of every single one of the faculties an takuna dakhilatan fi sultani ma fawqa, to be subservient to the faculty that is above it. Like, this is what he's saying, that just like in society you want children that are obedient to their parents. You want students that that show respect to their elders. Respect to their elders. Which sometimes would mean obedience when it's appropriate. It doesn't mean you can't question things. You should if you have an intellect and you're an adult. But there's still decorum. There's still decorum. And so then he says, وَمُتَأَمِّرَةً عَلَى مَا دُونَهَا, and to be in command of what is beneath it, in that faculty, what is subservient to it. فَحَقَّ الْقُوَّةِ الشَّهْوِيَّةِ أَن تَكُونَ مُؤْتَمِرَةً لِلْقُوَّةِ الْغَضَبِيَّةِ. So it is the duty of the appetitive faculty to be subservient to the irascible faculty, the قُوَّةِ الْغَضَبِيَّةِ. Right? So in other words, the genitals and the stomach should be subservient to the thumos, the spirited nature of the chest, the heart. وَحَقَّ الْقُوَّةِ الْغَضَبِيَّةِ أَن تَكُونَ مُؤْتَمِرَةً لِلْقُوَّةِ الْعَاقِلَةِ. And it's the duty of the irascible soul to be in obedience to the rational soul, to the rational faculty. وَحَقَّ الْقُوَّةِ الْعَاقِلَةِ أَن تَكُونَ مُسْتَضِيئَةً بِنُورِ الشَّرْعِ. And it is the duty of the rational faculty to be illuminated by the light of sacred law. وَمُؤْتَمَرَةً لِمَرَاسِمِهِ. And in obedience to its dictates. حتى تصير هذه القوة متظاهرة غير متعادية. So that they're working in common cause. These faculties now are working in common cause. They're not in opposition to one another. They're working to help one another. متظاهرة. كما قال الله تعالى ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل إخوانا على سرر متقابلين. So he uses this istinbat. It's a beautiful istinbat of the idea of in paradise, when all of the resentment is removed from the hearts, they sit as in a fraternity on chairs facing, on couches facing one another. So what he's saying is that when you are properly ordered, when your soul is properly ordered, then these faculties will be in fraternity. They'll be helping one another, not hindering one another. And then he says, وَكَمَا لَا يَنْفَكُ أَشْرَارُ الْعَالَمِ مِنْ أَنْ يَطْلُبُ مِنَ الْعَالَمِ الْفَسَادِ. You can never be without a world that doesn't have evildoers that want to introduce corruption and trouble into the world. وَيُعَادُ الْأَخْيَارِ. And they will oppose the virtuous. كما قال الله تعالى وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا فِي كُلِّ قَرْيَةٍ أَكَابِرَ مُجْرِمِيهَا لِيَمْكُرُوا فِيهَا. Just like that, we put in every city the big criminals plotting away in it. So every city, you usually see their clubs when you come into the city. I'm just kidding. Like, it was Freemasons. So he says that they're in every city, Allah says they're plotting away the evildoers. وقال سبحانه وكذلك جعلنا لكل نبي عدوا شياطين الإنس والجن. And like that, we made for every prophet an enemy of human and spirit demons. So the demonic realm is both human and spirit. And the human demons are worse because they're in alliance with the demonic realm, the principalities of darkness in high places that Romans talks about. You know, our war is not a war of flesh and blood, but of principalities of darkness, right? Of powers in high places. So that's who is opposed to us. They're opposed to righteousness in every time and place. And they will introduce fasad and sow corruption. And there you can see it now, what they're doing. It's amazing how they're turning everything upside down. Just look around you, what's happening. This is not normal, but it's because they have lost any religious grounding for their civilization. And once you lose religious grounding, Iblis is there to provide all the alternatives. He's there to provide all the alternatives. Because it's revelation that roots a people in reality. And once you lose revelation, it's hawa is what roots them in falsehood and illusion. So وَكَذَلِكَ فِي نَفْسِ الْإِنسَانِ. So just like you have these evildoers in every city, you have in the human being قُوًا رَدِيئَةٌ مِنَ الْهَوَى. You have these low faculties, these foul faculties. وَالشَّهْوَةِ وَالْحَسَدِ, envy. وَتَطْلُبُ الْفَسَادِ, and they're seeking corruption and trouble. وَتُعَادِي الْعَقْلَ وَالْفِكْرَ, and they will oppose reason and intelligence, deliberation. وكما نبه أنه يجب على الوالي أن يتبع الحق ولا يصغي إلى الأشرار ولا يعتمدهم كما قال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا بطانة من دونكم وكما قال الله تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء بعضهم أولياء بعض ومن يتولهم منكم فإنه منهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. وقال تعالى ونحكم بينهم بما أنزل الله ولا تتبع أهواءهم واحذرهم أن يفتنوك عن بعض ما أنزل الله إليك فإن تولوا فاعلم أنما يريد الله أن يصيبهم ببعض ذنوبهم وإن كثيرا من الناس لفاسقون. So he says, just like the governor has to follow the truth and should not listen to the evildoers in his kingdom, nor rely upon them, just as Allah has said, O you who believe, do not take as an inner counsel those who don't want good. And Allah says, O you who believe, do not take the Jews or the Christians as allies. Right? This is sometimes wrongly translated as friends. It means protecting allies. The wali is the one who protects. And so don't take them as, because they're protecting friends one of another, like the Christians protect the Jews. So, but they don't protect the Muslims. So this is really to Muslim governments and things like that. It's like when when Lawrence went to Arabia and convinced the Sharif of Mecca that the British wanted to establish a Arab state for them. But they had one condition, just help us get rid of your brothers, the Ottomans. And so they allied with them, with the British. And in the end, it was all a lie. They never planned on giving them any state. They just used them. And so that was a warning that had they listened to this verse, that wouldn't have happened. They would have never blown up the railway, because they couldn't defeat the Basha in Medina. He protected the city, but what they did, they ended up blowing up the railroad, so they couldn't get the help from them. So then he says, this chapter is a very important chapter. So then he says, that you should judge with what God has revealed to you, and don't. So then he says, whoever takes them as allies is from them, and Allah does not guide wrongdoing folk. So then he says to judge by what has been revealed to you, and do not follow your passions, and beware of them, that because they will seduce you into leaving some of what God has revealed to you. And if you turn away, know أنما يريد الله أن يصيبهم ببعض ذنوبهم, right? That God will afflict them with some of what their sins have wrought. And many people are profligate, are people that are outside of virtue. And he says the same with the intelligence and with your thinking should not rely upon these lower faculties. Don't think with your stomach. Don't think with your genitals. I mean, there's been presidents that's what they were thinking with. And then they end up just becoming completely compromised because they're عبد الهوى. وكما أنه يجب على الوالي أن يجاهد أعداء المسلمين كما قال تعالى وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم وكذلك يجب على العقل أن يجاهد الهوى فإن الهوى من عداء الله بدلالة قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما عبد في الأرض معبود أبغض إلى الله من الهوى ثم تلا قوله تعالى أفرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه وكما أن من استحوذ عليه الشيطان وأنساه ذكر الله كما قال الله تعالى استحوذ عليهم الشيطان فأنساهم ذكر الله وكذلك العقل إذا استحوذ عليه الهوى. So just as the governor must fight the enemies of the Muslims, the ruler, and Allah says in the Quran, prepare for them what you're able to of quwwah. It's nakira, quwwah, all types of power, intellectual power, military power, economic power, right? وَمِن رِبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ, and those things necessary for war preparation. Like countries have defense budgets for that reason. So ribat al-khayl it has that meaning. And the Prophet said, "Ala wa hiya rimaya." Quwwa is rimaya, which is basically now it's rockets, right? I mean, in his time it was arrows. But rimaya is the ability to shoot from a distance. So guns are a type of rimaya. So then it says, "Turhibuna bihi adu Allahi wa aduwakum." So they translate that as to put terror, but it means deter. And if you look at the root, the Latin root of deter, it's de terrere, out of fear. That's what a deterrent is. That's why having a strong military budget deters people from attacking you out of fear. So that's a really important distinction. تُرْهِبُونَ بِهِ عَدُوَّ اللَّهِ وَعَدُوَّكُمْ. So, and like that, the intelligence has to fight the passion, because the passion is one of the enemies of God. And the proof of that is the Prophet ﷺ said, nothing is worshipped on the earth more odious to God than passion, hawa, all the desires, right, the low desires. And then Allah says, have they not seen the one who took as a God his desires? And just as shaitan, if shaitan takes control of a human being, he makes that human being forget the remembrance of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, استحوذ عليهم الشيطان فأنساهم ذكر الله. Shaitan took over and they forgot the remembrance of God. And that's why there's so much demonic influence in our culture now, because God is not remembered. The churches are empty. People don't remember God. They don't even say grace. People used to say grace when they ate. We have the hadith of the fat shaitan and the skinny shaitan. If you don't bless the food you eat, you're empowering your shaitan, giving him caloric strength in the unseen realm. وكما أنه يجب على الوالي أن يسالم أعاديه إذا لم يقوى عليهم كما قال الله تعالى وإن جنحوا للسلم فاجنح له. This is very interesting. So he's saying also the governor has to make peace with his enemies if he's not capable of fighting them. So that's a smart ruler, like the Begums of Bhopal, right? These were women that ruled the Indian state of Bhopal. And when they had the Sepoy rebellion, the only Muslim group they didn't have any casualties were in Bhopal, because the Begum there did not permit the scholars to support the rebellion, because she said that the British were too strong. So it was out of her wisdom that she did that. And they're really interesting, those women that ruled Bhopal. There are actually pictures of one of the begums when the Viceroy of England came. She's in full purda, and she's meeting but she had ministers, and she ruled the country. She was very adept at what she was doing. So then he says, that Allah says, if they incline towards peace, you should incline towards peace, and not وَأَلَّا يَرْكَنَ إِلَيْهِمْ, not to incline towards them. وَإِن سَالَمْهُمْ, even if you're at peace with them, don't rely on them. كما قال الله تعالى ولا تركنوا إلى الذين ظلموا فتمسكم النار. Do not rely on those who are wrongdoers, because you will be afflicted by the fire. The fa there is sababiyya, so it'll cause you to, because you do that, it'll cause you to be afflicted by the fire. وكذلك يجب على العقل أن يسالم الأشرار من قوى النفس إذا عجز عنها. And also, the intelligent person has to work with his self also. There's a kind of, musalama, like a peace treaty between these faculties if